call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have an approval for tonight's agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. May I have a motion to approve the open session minutes of February 12th, 2018?
Motion to approve the open session minutes of January 12th, 2018.
February 12th, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Student comments. Maria,
So-
welcome back.
So good
Nice to have you here. We missed you.
It's been a minute.
We missed you.
So, I mean, from what I know, going on at NITMUC, first thing, well, we have a fundraiser dinner, March 2nd, at 6 p.m. for a Dominican fundraiser dinner in the NITMUC CAF. It's, the proceeds will be going to a mission trip to the Dominican Republic to supply them with medical supplies, and it's like run by Corey Lazar and Marie Roush and Senor Soto. So if you guys could join us at the dinner, it would be great. Another thing is we are having our own little like NITMUC fundraiser for water bottle filling stations. So kids like buy raffle tickets and you have little prizes and all the money goes to having like nice, instead of having just one in the building, we're gonna have more. Yeah.
So yeah, I just saw that on social media, so if you followed me on Twitter, I retweeted it, and we'll also make sure the link to the GoFundMe page is also put through our the school district's Twitter and Facebook. So great cause.
I mean, apparently the senator coming to the
I think he's seated right behind
Something.
you.
I don't know anything. Ignore me.
Keep going, don't worry.
Nice to have you at NITMUC. I am up to date. I think that's all I think is happening. But
We're just delighted to have you back in our presence.
Yes, thanks.
I'm happy to be back.
Do we, in all seriousness, do we have any news yet with regard to college?
With college, I've gotten accepted to 3 schools so far.
Okay, which schools?
I've gotten accepted to Emmanuel, UMass Amherst, and Clark. The rest I find out in March. It's Northeastern, that's where I'm going.
Okay.
Good for
Wow.
you.
Thank you. It's intense.
Thank you, Maria.
Are there any community comments? All right, we'll move on to the superintendent's comments.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. We are absolutely delighted to have a rep in the Senate, at least from Upton, Senator Mike Moore, here this evening. He reached out to us about a month or so ago, along with our town boards, to talk about the FY19 budget cycle, the priorities from his perspective at the state level. So when I got the offer, I very quickly and willingly said, yeah, we'd love you to come on board. So if you want to take a seat, Mike, it would be terrific.
We want me over here?
Yeah, wherever you're comfortable.
So how is it? And you could have kept going.
Sorry.
Well, it's nice to see everyone. And actually, when I was driving here, I was actually thinking that when I first got elected, I think there used to be, we went 2 years to, wasn't there a regional school committee meeting or that we used to have somewhere? Or the-
Multi-board
meeting, yes.
And I think we had the 4 of you, our 2 senators.
That was
and
myself,
our 2
Richard Moore, George Peterson, and I think it was John
Fernandez.
Hernandez. Thank you.
Yeah,
And we haven't had that for several years.
yeah, long overdue.
Thank you for letting me come tonight. I can go over the governor's numbers with you, but I think, as you all know, that the governor's numbers are the first step. The House will be coming out with their budget at the beginning of middle April. These are one of the meetings that it's like a love-hate type of thing, because I want to come out and meet with everyone, talk to you about what's going on. But I hated the fact that the Senate hasn't done our budget yet, so I can't tell you what we've accomplished, and what we're going to be doing. I can tell you that in the past two budgets, past budget, and we also did the RISE Act, which was the charter school reform expansion bill that the Senate had put forward, that never made it through the House. And the budget last year, the Senate did attempt to fund the new foundation budget recommendations. Obviously, we haven't been successful in getting that through the budget yet, so I'm hoping that we can get that through. In at least the Senate budget, feel confident that we should be able to get that through in the Senate budget, but we've done it in the past. And actually, when we were in the meeting that just left, this is actually saying this is the first time in 9 years that I'm actually getting an opportunity to go out and meet with boards. And instead of being here saying revenues are horrible, unemployment's this, we are cutting line items, this is the first time in 9 years that I can actually sit somewhere and say we have a budget surplus of $800 to $900 million right now. So.
You could stand a little of that 2 minutes and a half.
Well, and so I'm hoping that with this revenue, that if we can continue to at least meet the benchmarks, that we can go into the end of fiscal year on a positive note and hopefully spend some of that money, bringing your funding levels back up to where they should be. I think you all know that the Foundation Budget Review report estimated that the Foundation budget was out of whack by about $1 billion. So the version the Senate had put forth last year had a five-year implementation, $200 million a year, up to 5 years, so that we get that funded. I do know that I think the city of Worcester and one other community has now filed a lawsuit, or they joined a lawsuit on the foundation budget, and that's really how, if you remember, ed reform came about in
Back in the Duffy case, yeah.
So that's really how it all came about. So this actually could push the issue that brings us over the edge. Other than that, last 4 budgets, the student reimbursement rate, I filed amendments to get to $100. We never gotten there. I think we got to $55 2 years ago. Then we were back down in the 30s last year. But I'm really, hopefully, unless you want to go to the governor's numbers, which I think you probably have,
We do.
if those are going to change, I'd really like to try to get your feedback on what you want us to be trying to pursue in the Senate. And I'm assuming it's going to be the foundation budget, but is there anything else that you want us to try to achieve in this budget?
I think that
So this is your chance to voice.
I think our 2 biggest streams are always our Chapter 78, and then also the regional transportation reimbursement. Seems like we've been stuck at that, in that ballpark of about 65% reimbursement. And, I think we're at a place now, in 2 weeks from tonight, we will certify our budget and using, the House one, the governor's numbers, and we're looking at an increase of 0.57% in state aid between that additional $20 per student and then keeping the reimbursement rate flat. And obviously, it's the same as in all the other communities across the Commonwealth. It puts really an inordinate burden on the local municipalities. So we're in a situation now where we'll certify the budget probably in the ballpark of low 2% overall, but my increase to Benton and Upton is going to be in the high 3s.
Okay.
And, I anticipate there will be support, but it's not going to be easy. Because again, unfortunately, these 2 communities being 2-bedroom communities, there just isn't a broad tax base. It's all residential. So we had, in 2015, a significant override for both of these communities. Between the 2 towns, about $2.5 million. So quite frankly, politically and very pragmatically, there is an appetite to craft another school budget that requires an override. So we're living in a very, looking at very compressed increases, and quite frankly, this is, I would term, a very good budget year in the sense that, we're looking at a COLA for all of our employees of 2.15%, which I think is pretty reasonable, pretty market, and we locked in at a 0% increase on our health care. So the two biggest drivers we have are super, super reasonable, and this budget is going to be a real challenge. I'm going to be reporting out in a couple minutes that right now we've got about a shortfall of about $514,000
For this fiscal year?
for upcoming fiscal
Upcoming fiscal
19,
year, okay.
of where we are in our projected revenue using the governor's numbers, using what we think we can project from our two towns versus our projected expenditures. And again, there's, we're still, like you said, we're still early in the process and there's still variability on both sides. But when you look at just in,
How's your circuit breaker?
so that's another issue as well, because the reimbursement rate wasn't kept at the 75% as mandated by law, and got cut by 10% at the end, and never restored in the governor's supplemental budget. We're looking at a loss of the ballpark of like $33,000 there. And that's in this current fiscal year. So those are some of our big challenges. I think we're all cognizant. Everybody is in the same boat. I guess I'm a little bit of a masochist. Every so often I get on Google and I just Google the term school budget at Massachusetts, and I see all of my neighboring communities, like Shrewsbury. I know Joe Sawyer is looking at a $4 million gap in his FY19 budget. So I think we're cognizant of the challenges. I think we're unique, and again, because of our tax base in our two communities. And there's only so much that is sustainable. So we've had tremendous success, in my humble opinion, in our district, particularly coming out of the recession and restoring a lot of our programs, and our kids do very, very well. But any support, any commitment at the state level to follow through with those recommendations of the Foundation Budget Review Commission, and then also upping the percentage of the regional transportation reimbursement would also be helpful.
What's a good percentage increase for you in there for the regional school transportation?
Oh,
And the difference between your costs and what you've been getting, how much?
What would you say the delta is, Jay?
So we're getting about 65%, it's about 1.5 million, I think, in regular ed, so if we got another 10%, that could be,
150,000?
yeah. To get it to 75%, certainly, what do we want, 100%?
I remember.
Fully funded.
But anything better than what we're getting is better.
I think it was either in 2014 or, it was probably 2014, during Senator Brewer.
Senator Brewer, this is one of his priorities, that one year we came up with a very big increase in
A
this.
huge increase, but then in the process of 9C cuts,
Yeah.
we took a hit on that. So even if that could be increased to 80%, that would be tremendous. I used to have philosophical debates with John Fernandez regarding that, where he said, well, even though by statute it says 100% reimbursement, we'll never get there, and philosophically we probably shouldn't be at 100%, but if we could move upwards towards that 90 mark, that would be tremendous. But even like Jay said, inching it up by 10% would be significant.
Now, with the change on the national level from the No Child Left Behind Act to the
ESSA.
That's
Every
what
student
should
succeed at,
have.
yeah.
Is that provided any relief for you?
The only relief that we've really seen has been in some of the paperwork requirements and some of the mandates coming from DESE.
Yeah.
And there's a perception, at least amongst my colleagues throughout the state, is under this current administration, there won't be so much of a pressure around accountability and follow through and so on. You know, I'll give you one instance. Under No Child Left Behind, and then afterwards, the whole requirement around using test scores in teacher evaluation systems. Okay, it's you know, the Department of Ed has completely backed off. You know, this whole design around something known as district determined measures and creating an assessment system that ties student scores directly to a teacher's rating on their evaluation. So that sense, that has backed off. But as far as anything, you know, financial in implication, no, there's no difference.
What about the MCAS 2.0? How's that?
Do any of you want to speak to that? So I don't want to dominate the conversation here.
Well, I can add that with that, that's an increased cost for us, to have students have access to enough devices.
So it's the technology that's the added
The
cost.
technology piece is an additional cost to most districts in order to accommodate the fact that they're going through all the grade levels digitally. So that we've had financial impact on that.
And to follow up, it's a reoccurring cost as well. So there's going to be a refresh cycle. So it's not just the one-time investment to get everybody up to speed and get them the resources, but the devices have obviously a shelf life, and that needs to be accounted for over a longer period
What's
of
the
time.
shelf life on the device?
So we're using iPads. We're 5 through 12, one-to-one district. So all of our kids in 5 through 12 have an iPad. We're generally looking at a 3-year shelf life on the iPad. And what we do is we lease them and recycle them and so on.
Can I just, as far as money, the other thing that, and I don't exactly know how this all works, but the charter school costs, so we have 8 kids that go to charter school, we're assessed about $15,000 per kid, which is $6,000 more than what we pay our per pupil is. We get a piddly $10,000 reimbursement for that, so it's about 8% of the cost. But it seems like unless charter schools are funded in some other fashion beyond that, that we're paying the cost for kids to go to charter school as a public school district. So I don't know if anything can be looked at, or if that's part of the foundation review.
Well, the Senate made it part of the foundation. Well, when we did the whole expand the charter school initiative,
Right.
we made the foundation review budget recommendations part of that bill. I believe the original Foundation Budget Review Commission didn't comment on the charter schools. So we did it as part of an initiative to try to, if they wanted charter school expansion, we wanted the full reimbursement to our public schools. Because technically, both public schools, it's public schools funded.
They are.
I mean, so it's, that's actually one of the amendments I had to that RISE Act, was to make any charter school, the establishment of a charter school based on had to get local approval first. Because it is taking money that would go to the school districts. And the local taxpayers' money will be transferring over there. I don't know what we're going to be doing as far as the charter schools. That's where that's been such a touchy, I should say, since the referendum failed, it really hasn't been.
It's been quiet,
Yeah,
relatively
a
speaking.
big issue. So, but, well, is it any better now where are they still sending students back after the October date?
From charter schools?
Yeah.
Not really, we only have 8 kids, so it's not like it's a huge burden on us, other than it costs us $120,000 a year.
Okay.
But, you know, if we had 30 or 40 kids like some other towns do, I bet then it becomes much more of a challenge. But we haven't had any kids come back from charter. We sometimes get kids back from vocational schools for issues unrelated to you know, like say they can't accommodate special education needs or something like that, then they just return them to us and we bear the cost, or we carry the burden of that cost.
Okay.
Kind of plays into what we talked about last
Yeah.
week as far as, but when it's your student and they already live in your town, those laws don't really apply. It's just, it seems like the vocational schools don't pick up the sped costs that the rest of the public school world does.
Now, correct me, what is the reimbursement rate for the charter schools?
Well, so for us, based on the cherry sheet that's out right now, it's 8.5%.
Each year, isn't it?
It slides as
That's
far
what-
as
that's what I thought, so
after, you
what-
get reimbursement the first 3 years, then it drops to 0.
Okay.
You get your most reimbursement.
That's what I thought, but so that number you're saying right now, is this at the 0 reimbursement rate? Or is this at the?
It varies for the 8 kids that we have out.
This is just the net total. This is what we pay, this is what we're getting in reimbursement. It's 8.5% of the cost of being assessed. So some kids could be higher, some kids could be 0.
Don't quote me on this, but I think the rate is something like for the student's first year, it's like a 75% reimbursement.
Yeah.
Then it
goes
drops
down
to 50,
then
then
25,
20. Yeah.
And then 0.
Yeah. So you could have a kid, you know, and the few kids that we have, like Jay said, you know, could be attending the Marlboro Math and Science Academy. And those could be kids that, you know, are spending 8 years there. So, you know, you lose them. You lose that reimbursement pretty quick, and then you're carrying them for, you know, quite a long period of time.
I was thinking more just the high school years, but.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we've got a couple at the Ben Franklin Academy in Franklin.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, they're not, you know, geographically terribly close to us, but, you know, again, it's a small handful. You know, kind of tangentially to that, one issue that we're struggling with, particularly in the FY19 budget, is specifically one voc tech school, Norfolk Aggie, where I started as superintendent, and my first year we had 2 students accessing Norfolk Aggie. We're up to 15 now. So
students going to Norfolk Aggie?
yeah, so right now, as in a line item of our budget, we have $358,000 going to Norfolk Aggie. So basically, over 1% of the entire district school budget goes for 15 students. And this is a big, larger topic regarding admissions policies and voc tech schools. But I think a thing that's very challenging about this is Norfolk Aggie reserves a certain number of seats for students outside of their district because they can charge a higher rate, and that's additional revenue. You know, the question becomes, when does it become, you know, you've got students that you're denying that live in Norfolk County, but then you're taking students from Worcester County. And then being a regional school district, we absorb that cost within our budget. We don't charge it out to the individual 2 towns. So that's something that's also becoming a huge driver.
Well, and I know this is a touchy issue, but in my senatorial district, I have Blackstone Valley Tech, Assabet,
Yeah.
Daypath, and Worcester Voc. And just between those 4 schools, I think the waiting list is anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 students. I know there's other issues about folks, but I know the vote that went down for the expansion of Blackstone Valley Tech 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Yeah, I believe so.
Maybe even longer, on the expansion.
3 or 4, yeah.
Wouldn't that have covered some of the curriculum that some of these students are going for?
It would have.
Okay, well,
Some.
I know there's a positive to this and there's a negative when I say this, but Senator Fatman and I were both able just to get the Senate version of a capital bond bill, $4 million on the expansion of that expansion they wanted to do at Blackstone Valley Tech. So I don't know if that would be a cost savings to you if they went there rather than down to Norfolk Aggie.
It would have been a cost savings to the regional school district, but perhaps it also would have been an additional stress on our two towns.
Well, so this is with a negative and positive. We
Yeah.
tried, we know the ballot question failed. So we were trying to find a way to do this without burdening the taxpayer with that, to get this to provide some more access and to relieve that backlog we have. So it's got to go through the House budget, so the bill is going to conference committee right now. And then, as you know, the way bond bills work, even if it gets through the legislature, the administration then has to refund it. So that's up to you whether you think we can get this through, whether you think it's going to be beneficial or not. But and there actually was in the bond bill another amendment to dedicate $1 billion to expansion of all public schools throughout the Commonwealth. So we know that this is an issue that's got to be addressed.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've heard the multitude of issues around voc tech schools and admission policies and so on. I realized when it went down within the BVT's constituent communities here in the Valley, there were some strong opinions about admission policies and students getting in versus students not getting in and so on that definitely shaped a lot of that vote.
I think part of the toughest issue there is if you have a student who's working hard, National Honor Society or whatever academic class they're in, they're working hard, getting excellent grades, and then that student says, I want to go to the whole school. They have to come back and say, well, you're not the student that should be going there. We want the student that's not going to go to college. And it goes against the whole incentive of, you work hard, you get to, I don't see gives you more access. So it's kind of a different. I understand what everyone's saying about local schools traditionally with the student that's going to go to college.
No, but respectfully, that disadvantages the people who actually need to work with their hands in order to have a career, in order to have.
But what if you're that student who wants to work with your hands? And you
No,
get
I
to
understand
work
what you're
with your grades,
saying.
and you're the parent.
No, I get that.
So
What
that's
I'm
what I'm
saying
saying.
is-
So this, and I understand what you're saying.
Because
This is the
relatively
dilemma that
speaking-
you have between the two arguments.
Because relatively speaking, you're serving a much smaller population if you go totally in the direction that you're talking about. You're not serving the population very well. So what you're trying to do is spread out the opportunities to a larger number of students, right? And I understand the incentives and everything, but we've got to start thinking about how we serve the whole population, not just the top 10%.
Well, I think a better approach would be try to expand the service access to the programs. I just have a hard time telling a parent and a student who's put the time and effort into having those good grades and doing that, because you're doing well, you shouldn't have access to this.
I think in the big picture, to go back to your question about MCAS 2.0, here we are 25 years later celebrating Ed Reform Act of 1993.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of come full circle in the sense that we need to go back to more applied, hands-on, project-based learning for all kids.
I agree.
Here at this committee level, as a committee, we're always discussing BVT, God bless them across the street. They do an incredible job marketing that school, and I think they have tremendous outcomes for their kids. But I've also had a lot of conversations with parents who their child did not get into BVT, and they have some nervousness about sending them here in the sense that they have this perception, Nipmuc Regional High School is strictly an academic high school. It's strictly a college preparatory institution.
Right.
And we're moving away from that. Yes, we care about AP and we really want to prepare our kids for post-secondary study, but we also realize for the type of work and the jobs that don't even exist today that we're going to be sending our kids out to someday, they need more opportunities that are project-based, that are collaborative in nature and so on.
I think it's Southheim Worcester. They're actually in the process with MSBA, and possibly I think they're going to be rebuilding the school. they're actually looking at trying to bring some of that programming into South High.
Yeah.
Because you've got Worcester Voc that has, you know, a backlog of students trying to get in. This addresses the thing you're saying, and I actually agree with that. I think we should be trying to bring more some of this in. I mean, I don't know how old everyone is here, but I remember going to school, we had shop.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't to the level you should have had, but at least gave you some exposure.
Yeah, and I think those days are gone where we're going to have, you know, the old expression from the 80s, the shopping mall high school that did everything. But I think having more project-based learning, more opportunities for kids to be out in the community with internships and connecting with our parents, with community members, that's the vision of where we want to see Nipmuc and our entire district go.
And you brought up the MCAS. That sort of touches on the same theme. The MCAS 2.0
It's kind of antithetical to
is
that vision.
antithetical to that. It's actually upping the ante on making the test more difficult, probably to try to get the distribution to be, you know, the curve to distribute the proper way on the statistician's test. But it doesn't necessarily give the students the type of actual hands-on training for the real world, you know, whether it's in academics and sciences or in vocational training, to really give them what they need beyond
Actually,
college.
one of the biggest, when you talk about skills, one of the biggest critiques we hear of students throughout the system not having the interpersonal skills graduating high school.
The soft
Yeah.
skills, yeah.
Yeah, the soft skills that the businesses look for.
Yep.
And I see my own kids, they don't like to make phone calls, they don't like to talk, it's texting. I mean, some of these skills that you're gonna need to be successful.
Sure.
And that is a part of project-based learning when you're dealing with real-life situations. And actually, just to kind of touch on that, Joe, I know that probably 4 or 5 years ago when my first son went across the street, that was a big part of my decision, was the hands-on project-based learning, interpersonal skills, making phone calls, being on, technically almost on the job, and those professionalism skills that were prevalent across the street. And we had a conversation about, well, we can't be what is across the street, we can never replicate that, but we can be more like that and provide opportunities. And I know that that would certainly affect my decision today versus 4 or 5 years ago, in terms of how Nipmuc has morphed and changed to become more project-based.
Is there any collaborations that you could have with the school where they're so close that they can provide additional services on the longer school day?
Almost like how we have like VHS classes where like students get to do something that we don't necessarily have teachers for. What if we could offer the opportunity to go maybe take a class at BBT, or like if BBT kids want to come here and try to take one class, like that kind of system that they have at colleges.
Because I was trying to arrange in Millbury High School, they have literally a mile away is the New England Regional Carpenters Training Center. And they actually have carpenters who are certified teachers. But due to the costs, we would, just like they were going to try to allow them to go to the training center to learn carpentry and all those types of trades for the students that couldn't get into the voc school. But due to the cost of the program, they were never able to implement it.
So did Millbury High School actually start a Chapter 74 program?
Not with.
See, and we would be very open to that, and again, I think that could be a creative solution, and then also to kind of go back to our very first point about funding, some of the things that we've been starting to think about is what type of new partnerships could we create to create Chapter 74 programs here at Nipmuc so that we could access some additional funding, but also give our kids those hands-on
You know what actually
opportunities.
makes me good at this? We were talking about this in the Patrick administration, it was the regional incentive grants.
Mm-hmm.
But now the Baker administration and my governor, I think they have the community compacts. That could be an initiative that they are funding different types of programs for efficiency, expansion.
Yeah.
And so that could be something.
They love the regional
Right,
input.
so you could apply to that. Maybe that's something they could look at and have them fund that. Is that, again, as you say, just my Senate district, I got 1,500 or 2,000. Across the state, there's a lot of kids who are denied the access. And this could be something that could be modeled to look at.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Didn't we apply for that community compact grant?
We did, not the community, but the innovation one,
Right.
I want to say 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay, the innovation grants, yeah. Now, this is the Patrick administration, Patrick Murray had the regional incentives grants. And actually, they use them a lot for the, you saw them for the regional dispatch.
Yeah.
And now Baker Polito administration are really giving them now to specific local municipalities to look at infrastructure or different innovative ways to be more efficient and expand access to programs.
I know both Mendon and Upton have signed community compact initiatives with the administration.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, because the district is a separate government entity, do they qualify to even apply for that since they're not under the umbrella of the two towns? That would be a question that.
It may not even been considered. It might just, and if it's not,
But the fact that
Try.
the two towns have already signed agreements.
but with this, you hire your own separate entity from the towns. That might be a revenue source to look at.
Sure. Any other,
Can I throw out one other thing?
sure?
I think the biggest challenge, getting back to the funding, I think the biggest challenge that we have and the two towns have is there's a limited amount of money that they're going to get next year over what they got this year. And the same for us. We get our money from the state or we get it from the towns, and they only have so much. It's been mentioned to me a couple of times. As an example, this year the minimum contribution for Upton is up 6.5%, and I think 6.3% for Mendon. Maybe allowing the towns to assess that minimum increase outside of the parameters of Prop 2.5, which far exceeds it, would allow them to actually raise that kind of money. So let me give you something really challenging to work on, because, but, I mean, that is the challenge, is where does the money come from? If you're only going to get, both Mendon and Upton this year are going to have about $650,000, $600,000 of new money. That's it. And
I think it would be very, very hard to get 2.5 removed or any sort of exclusions. Anytime there's been any attempt even to exclude a certain revenue stream from coming in, there's a lot of.
I understand that, I guess.
Actually, because you were explaining, you were talking about this, the 2.5. Something to remember is that in this budget coming up, so not this budget, this election coming up, you will have a constitutional amendment on
fair share ballot.
The fair share. The fair share amendment is what, if you over $1 million, your income's over $1 million, your income tax will be increased 4%. DOR, I'm not asking whether you support it or not, this is the DOR has estimated that the 13,000 to 14,000 people that it affects would bring in about $1.9 billion. And I'm trying to remember, I think there's one other state that actually did this, and you saw a small percentage that they had the financial means to change their residency. But even at that, if you look at, even if you're $1 billion, the language of this referendum is where the money is earmarked to education and transportation. So that also could be a way to that would actually be fiscal year 2020, but or maybe even a sub budget. So that actually is a way to maybe possibly look at trying to finally get this foundation budget funded.
What are you hearing as a corollary on the downside of that? Giveth and taketh away, the whole conversation about reducing the sales income tax.
Well, I was just going to say that's the only. So with that initiative, the business community, I think it's the Retail Association of Mass, I'm not sure if they actually get their ballot initiative approved.
Okay.
If they get enough signatures yet.
I know there was challenges in
Yeah,
court.
they were going to actually, they were trying to get signatures to have a referendum to reduce the sales tax back down to, I think it was 4%. It's basically roughly, it would be about the same. It would equate, the 1.9 billion we would expect from the fair share would be gone if the voters then reduce the sales tax. So, and not to predict, I would actually think you'd probably see both of those initiatives pass.
Yeah.
In one way, the voters will go for more money, but then in the other way, the sales tax is going to have a broader relief to people. So that's a good question.
Yeah,
So we might see it in one way, then lose it in another way.
yeah, it's a source of concern.
But, I mean, this is where, and I'm not advocating for, but people have to sit back and look. You want clean, you want good streets, you want good schools, whether they're regional or they're in the school district.
You have to
As
pay.
they're saying, nothing's free,
Yeah.
so there's a cost.
But it is a challenge when, the town's minimum contribution assessment is 80% of the money that they're gonna have coming in as an increase. I mean, it doesn't leave much for the rest of the town, and we're not looking to bankrupt the towns or take away other services, but
But, yeah, I realistically.
I'm not asking you to step on the third rail.
No, I can just tell you, well, I wouldn't step on that third rail. It's an initiative that's not gonna, I don't think you'll see anyone file that. And with that pass so overwhelmingly, that was an initiative that the voters put through. I don't think you'll ever see. You'd have to see another referendum come back for what I think, you'd have to see a referendum come back to change that.
So the solution is really to get the foundation review recommendations into effect and somehow get funding for that.
Yeah, that's our hope over the next couple of years.
And the other factor that we have to look at too, which I think is more so now, is what's going on in Washington. If you look at, and this came from the Baker administration, if the healthcare reform had gone through Congress and been signed by the president, they had estimated that that would cost the state $1.5 to $2 billion. So it's really just a transference of the federal government paying for it, put it to the states and say, okay, now you've got to fund it if you want it. So if that ever moves forward, then there's going to be funding issues with that. We see the infrastructure, we see the infrastructure package that they're talking about, a $1.5 trillion that they think they're going to do. Well, the question is how they're going to pay for that. Is that going to be another burden to the states, or is that something the federal government's going to pay for? We have the tax cuts that just went into effect. Is it going to follow through with what they're hoping it's going to do for the economy? So there's a lot of unknowns right now. That $900 million that we have, 800 to 900 that we have right now, by next fall could be eaten up if certain federal initiatives go through. So.
That felt like a rock.
I
So
know.
getting back, the
Second,
good
he
news
said.
was, it's the first time I've been here with 900,
Yeah, really, talk about a common thing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much.
And if there's anything else that comes up, please do not hesitate to reach out. If you want to have me come back from another meeting. Again, our budget won't be done until the last week of May.
Yeah.
If they release it the second or third week, we go in and debate it the last week. So if anything between now and then, or if there's anything that you think that you want us to look at, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. And if there's anything to do with community contact, just let me know so if I can try to get help there.
Appreciate it.
Is
Appreciate
there-
everything that you do.
Is there any talk of doing a joint House Senate type budget like they've done in the past, where basically this is what's coming out and we've already agreed to it, or is it going to be one and then the other?
There hasn't been any talk. I think last year what they did do, we did last year, in the previous year, I think the three branches all agreed that this would be the revenue mark. The budget would be this, and that would have to stay within that budget.
I think the staple piece that you guys have locked in is the minimum local contribution staying consistent as well.
Yeah.
So
So
we're hoping that's going to go up first before you lock it in.
I'm hoping so too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, you're up again now.
I actually remember.
Okay, just as I kind of alluded to it, just as a status update for where we are in the FY19 budget development cycle. As I put in the background notes, our current shortfall right now in the process is approximately $514,000 for FY19. Really, a part of this is looking at a readjustment of what we're projecting as far as our assessments to our two towns, but also of it has been a recent out-of-district placement that has some significant expenses associated with it. So right now, we will be sharing a little bit more with a budget subcommittee meeting that'll be held in a couple days on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And then we present to the Upton FinCom and get their reaction right after that, also Wednesday evening. And 2 weeks from tonight, we'll have something finalized that the school committee will certify for FY19. Okay? Next, you do have in your packet, I just shared, I know we discussed this, but Jay has prepared a formal statement of interest document to go to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or the MSBA. It is a statement of interest for reimbursement for a project to replace 10,000 square feet of the roof here at Nipmuc. So the flat portion of the roof, which is approximately 10,000 square feet, it is a membrane roof. It's now 21 years old, and within the last 10 years, we've had at least 20 instances of leaks. So, you know, we don't have the exact number, but we feel very strongly it will require replacement within the next 2 to 5 years at a minimum. So what this statement of interest does is it gets us in the queue, so to speak, for reimbursement projects. Realize there's quite a few that would be prioritized over this, but I think it's important to get this initial statement of interest in, and then hopefully resubmit it on an annual basis so that it raises its position in the queue. I don't know, do you want to add anything to that, Jack?
Not particularly. I mean, we basically, like Joe said, we need to get it in the queue. It is something we're going to have to address probably sooner rather than later. It's not a gigantic project. I mean, I was talked to an architect that did some other work for us, and he told me about $30 a square foot, which isn't an enormous amount of money in the big scheme of things, but we also have all the HVAC units for the entire building are sitting there and probably have to get removed to do the roof and then put back, so there's additional costs. I have no idea whether they'll even approve this at this point or just push it on and say, look, come back to us in a year, but it's a start.
Okay, and then last but not least in my report is something positive and really, really happy that we're happy to share with you. We received word right before February break that we have received a grant for $8,000 from the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center in order to conduct a clean energy activity day for all of our 7th graders at Misco Hill. And Dave Quinn, our Director of Technology Integration, spearheaded this effort. And Dave, talk to us a little bit about this.
Thanks so much, Superintendent, Madam Chair, rest of the honorable body. It's a pleasure to join you tonight. This is really a team effort. This wouldn't have happened had Paul Marshall not sent me an email back in September notifying me of the grant. Then Jen Mannion was the first person I went to and said, who could I collaborate with? And she brought our science department chairs, Brittany Kaler and Jen Parent, on board. Fortunately, they couldn't be here tonight, but they were intricate parts of putting together this grant. So I just want to run quickly through what this grant is about, what our goals were, and where we see this going over the next couple months. So the Mass Clean Energy Center puts together $8,000 grants for workforce development. One of the big keys here, as we've talked about, is how do we increase opportunities for students to have hands-on STEM learning to advance their potential career trajectories. So just like we were talking about here just a few moments ago, how do we make that a reality here in Mendon Upton? The activity day is designed to take place during the school day, lasts a minimum of 3 hours. The target is to get about 100 students to participate. At least half of those should be female because we've got underrepresentation by females within STEM fields, and we need to expose them to opportunities, give them the chance to practice and learn how fun they can be. And then finally, and most importantly, they're looking for some things that are fun. So some aspects of the grant you might say, this is a little bit unexpected, but it's about to creating a memorable experience. So what are our goals for it? So goal number one, how do we introduce new STEM fields to our students? Secondly, we want this grant to be sustainable, not just a one-day investment. So we look for items that would sustain us over the course of several years. So we've invested heavily in clean energy type kits that will be used in VSCO, but could also be distributed across the other 3 buildings. Goal 3 was to try to invest in initiatives that integrated across the grade level. So we're bringing in aspects of the Nipmuc Makerspace composting project, and we're also trying to work with the Misco Hill Vegetable Garden, which has emanated out of our special education and summer school program. So we want to capitalize on those synergies to link them all together to get as many students involved as possible. Goal 4, community engagement. So we wanted to tap into the knowledge base of our parent group. We've reached out to parents to get them on board as volunteers. We're still doing some of that outreach, but this was a opportunity to connect the community with the schools, much like the 21st Century Learning Conferences and many of the other initiatives that are going on in the district. And then goal 5, which is probably the most important, how do we create a memorable experience for students so they have a positive association with STEM, they have a positive association with learning, and they can start to see themselves in these different careers. So what are the activities, or what's kind of the structure of the day? The first one is we're going to try to lead off with a student-led panel. We're not sure if we're going to go with a town hall style or just a student like Maria interviewing several members of the community who are in the STEM field already. The CEO of the Mass CEC, Stephen Pike, has already agreed to serve on the panel. We've got a solar panel installation electrician who's volunteered, and then we have somebody with the Cape Cod Clean Energy who's also expressed interest. From there, we're going to move into our hands-on activities, probably about an hour-and-a-half activity, where students beforehand will have a choice of opting into either a solar or a wind energy activity based on what they're interested in. Their goal is to put together these kits, either a solar kit or a wind kit. These are the vernier kits that we'll be using, and power an LED light bulb. And then from there, what they're going to test is different variables, whether the angle of the solar panels, the direction of the solar panels, the angle of the wind, with various different challenges to see how those variables impact the amount of energy or the brightness of the light. They'll record their reactions and their responses on Flipgrid, which we can share out with the community outreach. And then finally, the third part of the activity is the fun piece. We're going to have an ice cream social to celebrate the success. We're also going to have a raffle where students are going to complete an exit ticket where they're going to answer questions either about what was going on in the panel or what they've learned over the course of the day. Students with the most correct answers will be entered into a raffle, and the raffle will provide a solar-powered iPad charger. And then finally, we have an extended day, which is an optional project. This kind of goes into a bigger picture synergy. We have decided to try to put together a solar-powered composting system and a solar and wind-powered irrigation system into the courtyard of the Misco Hill Middle School. So the easier part is the solar-powered composting. We've already got it here at Nipmuc. We've got that structure in place. We have high school students who have done it who will come down and help the middle school students put this together. We're thinking about starting a club before school to try to prep it, so we're just executing on the day of the event. The added degree of difficulty is our watering system. So this is something that we haven't done before, but we think is doable. We've got some community partners who have some experience. So what it would involve is we're hoping to get a rain barrel, but if not, there's a spigot nearby, and what we would do is use a Raspberry Pi mini computer to program a solenoid valve to water the plants either for 2 minutes once a day. The nice thing about both of these projects is the Raspberry Pi can get further and further sophisticated. So there are sensors that we can put into the soil to only water if there's X amount of moisture, or if we can link it up to a weather underground station. If we know that the weather is going to be raining for the next 3 days, we know to turn it off. And these are all projects that with little to code, we can continue to level up. So we can start small, we can start basic, but we can build upon it, build the complexity, and that feeds into the high school so we can do further complex projects up here as well. Just to kind of bring it on home, so what are we going to be doing over the next couple months? First, a press release announcing to the local community, hey, we got this grant, it's really excited. Please come by, being able to look it up. Next, we're going to reach out to our local delegation. We think it's important that our municipal, state, and congressional leadership be aware of what we're doing and invite them to come on down to see it. Next, we're going to try to identify parents and other community members who we may not have located yet, who may be willing to participate, to be a part of this project. And then finally, it's just, finalizing logistics for a smooth, successful, enjoyable event for our students. So thank you for your continued support of the endeavors that we do across the district. This culture of yes that we have makes some really incredible things possible, and it all starts with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Dave?
I love the Raspberry Pi and the ability to increment gradually over time. It's wonderful. I connect it to the web, get statistics about how the ground is being irrigated, all that stuff. It just leads to the future. It's awesome.
Yeah, we're hoping to do more temperature-oriented sensing with the compost that we have here to tweak the blower. It's a work in progress. It's a learning experience for me because it's not necessarily my area of expertise, but I think it's a good opportunity to model to the students that we're co-learning with them, and it's exciting.
I mean, that fits into the project-based learning that we're talking
Absolutely.
about. Anything like that we can generate out of the school, it's wonderful.
And if you really think, Dave's position is Director of Technology Integration, and it's more than, okay, he works with students and teachers with iPads and laptops and so on. You see how holistic and how interdisciplinary all of this work is. So kudos to you, Dave.
Yeah,
Kudos
great
to
job.
the kids that you're working with
Again,
and the teachers.
It's a team effort from the students to
Yeah.
the teachers and everybody involved. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the subcommittee updates, and the budget subcommittee will be next. So, Dr. Ruszczyk had the opportunity to present to the Minden Finance Committee on last Wednesday.
It was last Wednesday, yeah, the 21st.
There were a number of school committee members there, along with the FinCom of Minden. Dr. Ruszczyk did a really nice job with the first pass that we presented here at the school committee level out to the public, and the Minden FinCom had a lot of questions, and I thought they were very thoughtful in their questions.
I agree.
With some concerns about how we're going to bridge this gap and make the budget work for our school committee, for our schools and children. Anyone else that was there like to comment on anything?
Well, just that many of the same topics that we just talked.
Right, yeah.
spent
Pretty much.
Came up.
Yeah.
Came up in that meeting as well. So covered a lot of different areas, I think. So there's a big difference between last week and this week. It's going to keep on changing like that, right?
Yeah, it's always super fluid. I think the good news, without being in a crystal, having a crystal ball, realize when we build the budget every year and it's certified each March, it's always using the governor's budget numbers, and those are always clearly the most conservative. I'm going to be very clear. We are going to have to make cuts, but bridging that gap is, a two-pronged approach. It's going to be some cuts, but then hopefully things will work out with improved revenue as we go through the House and the Senate budgets. Will be also another element of bridging that gap. But we still have some work ahead, and we have to watch things very carefully. Realize, we go with the most conservative estimates on both the expenditure and the revenue side. So we need some things to break, but I'm also not going to sugarcoat it. There's going to be some places where we're going to have to sustain some cuts and, you know, there's going to have to be some places where there's going to have to be some consolidations. We'll bridge that gap. I think it's like anything, we need to meet the needs of our kids in our schools, but I think we also have to be very realistic about the burden that our two towns have and what is feasible. But I saw last Wednesday's presentation as very optimistic, and I see it as a continuation of the good partnership and the good communication that exists between the regional school district and our two communities.
And then we have Upton's FinCom meeting Wednesday night.
Mm-hmm.
Right, moving on to new business.
Okay, the first item, I think long overdue. We have Chris Schmidt here, our athletic director. I asked Chris a while ago to put together a presentation to kind of share where we are with the athletic program. I think Chris has done a tremendous job in the last 2.5 years in really restoring a lot of pride and to the program for all of our stakeholders, and I think he's really provided a great deal of leadership and vision of where we want to go. So I've asked Chris to talk tonight a little bit about the state of the program, some of the successes, some things that he sees on the horizon as far as challenges, and then also some specific improvements that he's brought to the program. So Chris, take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for having me tonight. As I think Dr. Maruschek said, this is probably a presentation that is overdue. Whether this is something that we look at on a yearly basis or every other year, I do think it's important because I think in terms of athletics, it's a very public part of what we do at our high school and in our community. And I think there are a lot of things that go on that are far beyond what you see on the fields and on the court and beyond. So this was kind of my opportunity to share with you a lot of sort of what I've done in my first 3 years or 2.5 years at this point. So sort of joking aside, the state of the program. Just from a statistical point of view, we have 25 varsity sport teams here, the overwhelming majority of which carry junior varsity programs, 12 female, 12 male, and then we have one mixed gender, which is golf. Both our male and female athletes can participate on that. They do have opportunities to participate in other programs. It just hasn't happened in my time here. We also do have 2 co-op opportunities for our students that are not our teams, but teams that we share with Northbridge High School, our boys ice hockey team, and then both boys and girls swimming. We actually do serve as host school for a couple of co-ops as well, which is our alpine ski team and our boys, volleyball team, both of which we co-op with our friends across the street. We do anticipate a 558 total athletes this year based on projections for our spring season. We do have signups currently, and that's an increase of 21% over 2 years since my time. So I think the nice thing is our numbers are going up, and I think there's a lot of pride behind our programs at this time. When I was meeting with Mr. Clements and Ms. Moran as part of my interview process, I sort of presented my short-term, long-term plan for what I saw the programs, and there were 3 areas that I saw as my responsibility with regards to our student athletes and our program, and that is through leadership, the school and the community, and then what I like to call creating the whole athlete. So I kind of wanted to report to you tonight sort of what we've done over the past 2.5 years to address these and where we're going beyond. As far as leadership goes, and primarily not only my leadership, but that of our student athletes in particular, which I've focused on, I think, one, I want you to understand that I have an open door policy with not only our athletes, but our coaches, and really our parents for the most part. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had over the years, just meeting with our athletes, counseling them, not always solving their problems, but ultimately helping them solve their problems, which I think is one of the most important things. Every cycle, I meet with all of our captains, and we have a 7-day cycle here at the high school. So it happened to be today, day 5. I have lunch with our captains. We do some leadership training. So I'll usually have a focus for the lunch, but also an opportunity for them to share their thoughts, their concerns, their questions with me in a very open-ended opportunity for them. This past year, we instituted the DVC, which is our Dual Valley Conference, which I also serve as the president for. We started a captain's conference, and this is a yearly opportunity for our kids to get together with the other 5 schools in our conference to meet, to learn about leadership. We have a guest speaker, and to really come together and create a stronger bond, which is something that our kids have had a chance to do. I've introduced the MIA Ambassador Program. What that is two of our students each year, could be sophomores, juniors. This year, 2 juniors, 1 male, 1 female, have the opportunity to act as student-athlete liaisons between our school and the MIAA, which is our governing body for high school athletics here in the Commonwealth. They do some community service, but also another opportunity for them to gain leadership experience and to really act as goodwill officers for us with the state association. They also attended an MIA Sportsmanship Summit at Gillette this past November, where we brought about a dozen of our athletes, 6 male, 6 female, once again to meet with students all over the state, to gain leadership opportunity, to hear some great speakers. 2 years ago, we had John Gordon, who is a fantastic motivational speaker. I use him a lot with our kids because he's done some great work, especially in the world of athletics. They get to hear Robert Kraft. Typically, they'll have one of the Patriots speak, which I have my own opinions about, but the kids enjoy it. We have a Women in Sports program that also our kids benefit from each year. 2 of our female student athletes head to Faneuil Hall. Once again, another opportunity for leadership and to gain exposure for them. And then I also have student interns as well, who work with me 5 out of the 7 days of the cycle, assist me, but gain opportunities as well. And part of that is a capstone for them. So I have 2, 1 male, 1 female this year. Each of them will be conducting a capstone project as part of their internship to somehow benefit the athletic program. School and community, I think, I've really taken this input from people that have been here before me. They tell me that there's this improved or renewed sense of pride in what Nipmuc is and what Nipmuc athletics is, and I take a huge sense of pride and enjoyment about that, because that's sort of the sense that what is going on is working. You see the kids wearing their stuff around, wearing the regalia, they genuinely enjoy what they do. You can see in the picture, I instituted something called Warrior of the Month. Every month I acknowledge a male and female athlete as nominated by the coaches for work both on and off the field. Not necessarily, the highest scorer or the best player, but students who have contributed both to their team but beyond, whether it be athletics as a whole, but the school community. And each month I award 2 students, and they get a t-shirt and they enjoy it. We've built some summer programming, so really gone beyond the school year with our middle school students as well. to get them involved in Nipmuc athletics. I think we strengthened our relationship with many of the youth organizations in town, and those bonds have improved, and I think over time, we're hoping to pay those dividends. People seem to feel that moving the football program here full-time, playing the games here at Nipmuc has added to our new sense of pride, and Saturdays have been fun. I can honestly say that. You know, the 1 o'clock, if you've not been to a game, you know, there's a genuine enjoyment of the kids and the community coming here to watch football. Something we've done is what we call the Warrior in Training program. We take some of our captains, our student leaders, to Memorial and Clough and have them work with some of our younger future Warriors. They'll typically go into the gym classes, talk to them about a topic. It might be sportsmanship, it might be nutrition, and then they'll spend the period with them engaged in whatever activity. You know, we did the jump rope for heart one time. I seem to recall some floor hockey being played, but I think the younger kids enjoy it, and our kids do as well. And then something I called NCAA Nights. Over the last couple of years, we've had people come in and talk about college sports. My first year, we had a gentleman come and talk to the community about recruiting and what the recruitment process looks like now. And then last year, I had a panel of experts, I'll call Division I athletes, Division II, Division III athletes. I had a Division III head coach, a Division III athletic director come in and talk to the community about sports at the college level and what that next step looks like, and an opportunity for the community to ask questions and engage in that. And that's something I'm hoping to do on a cyclical basis, excuse me. The last one, and I think the one that's maybe the most important, but at the same time the most challenging because it doesn't always show in visible results, if you will, is what I like to call developing the whole athlete. And I would say this is the one that we've made strides in, but we will continue to make greater strides in. Something I have for the kids is what I call the message of the year. Last year, it was perseverance. And everything I did between speakers, between talking, my message to the kids was, message to the parents, was the concept of perseverance and what that means throughout the athletic world. This year, it's the idea of being positive and believing in yourself, and the impact that can have. I do a lot with coaches education, not only for our own coaches and try to promote that, but I'm also a certified coaches education teacher, which happened this year. So offering that to our community of coaches, I think is something that has only just begun, but I think will be very beneficial. We've added a strength and conditioning coach here, and that goes far beyond just simply working out in the weight room. It's someone that is there beyond the teams to advise our athletes on how to help them, the whole wellness perspective. The other thing that we've really looked at is the social emotional piece of our athletes, and a lot of that has been through my discussions with the kids and how we can do our best, not only as myself as AD, but as our coaches, but helping to make sure we support that, because I think now more than ever, being a high school athlete is not easy. The amount of time that they have to spend, whether it be with their classwork, most importantly, but also with sports, with other things pulling at them. We all know about technology and the impact that it has on our kids. It's a difficult time, and you know, we, especially myself, spend a lot of time trying to counsel as best. We can always do better, but it's something that we do feel is very important. One of the things I wanted to share with you is the way that I've looked at coaching our coaches, if you will. Once again, there's an open door policy with my coaches, you know, and it's really been to be non-judgmental. I think one of the most important roles I have is being able to support our coaches and help them grow. that growth mindset. And if you can't have the open door, that's going to be something difficult. So I think if you talk to our coaches, that's something that exists. I'm always giving them feedback and talking with them, and it's not so much about X's and O's, because I didn't coach every sport, I can't do that, but really it's what goes into being a coach and how I can support them and sort of give them that third person feel of someone who's removed from the situation and providing that other perspective to help them see a situation. And you know, sometimes when things don't work, what do we need to do better, and how can I help them improve their own craft? We do have meetings at the end of the season, and part of those meetings is, in my discussion with them, is looking at their communication with me, with their teams, with the parents, with the community, their understanding of the sport and rules, because that's a small part of it. Their professionalism, how they represent themselves, how they represent us. And do they provide a safe environment for our kids? Because ultimately that's the most important thing. So that's something that I constantly look at and talk with our coaches. And you know, for me, it's giving them actionable feedback and what can they do to, well, frankly, be better coaches. And I think that's what we want, we want coaches who want to be better coaches. And that's one of the things that I've expressed to them that I want in a coach, because those are the people that you can work with. And that's something that we're constantly looking at. And then, of course, the coach's education piece, getting them to be able to improve their craft beyond certainly what I can provide here. Sort of the last thing I wanted to share with you tonight was the challenges I think that we face as a district beyond sort of now. We're going to always sort of be confronted with the challenge of the facility. There are some inherent limitations that we have. Listen, I'd be the first person to come to you and say I want a turf field, because believe me, I do. And I can't tell you how easier that would make my life. But the reality is that may not be the case. But there are some simple improvements I think we could make that can help our fields. You know, we have a constant issue with our irrigation and our and watering of fields. That it's not $1 million upgrade, but it's a much smaller one that would be very beneficial. I mean, I can't tell you how much that Jay and I go back and forth over this, and it's unfortunately a problem that has existed for a long time, that it's something that I think does need to be addressed.
And just to clarify, Chris, you're talking about the inadequacy of the irrigation well.
That is correct, yes. We have 3 main areas that we use here. The front field, sometimes referred to as the football field, our back field, which is lacrosse and field hockey primarily, and then our baseball and softball. They're fed by 3 wells that, frankly, are insufficient for what they do. 2 years ago, they ran out by mid-July, and if you ever saw pictures of our field 2 years ago, it was barren. It was a shame. Last year was a little bit better, but even with all that rain, we still had issues with the irrigation system. And it makes the amount that we use those fields, you know, if you took a walk out, especially on our backfield where field hockey and lacrosse plays, it's problematic. We don't have a track here, and you know, I think one of the things I would ask you to understand is that does impact the track and the cross-country program. You know, having to go to MISCO in the spring to practice is a challenge, and we can't host our own track meets. BVT is nice enough to allow us to host a track meet there, but essentially our track programs are on the road for 70–80% of their season, which when you're trying to grow a program, and I think those are the ones that we really are looking at, how can we grow, it's a challenge. You know, I think, is our budget commensurate with our community expectations? Maybe not. You know, we have a lot of we've had a lot of success, and I think you all know that, which is why I didn't highlight it tonight. But reality is, the more success we have, the more people want, and the more people want, that comes with money. You know, over the last couple of years, everything that goes into my budget has increased in terms of cost. Transportation, referees, supplies, and coaches' salaries. I mean, that's basically what makes up my budget, and they've all increased. And you know, we've enjoyed success, and the kids love the uniforms and this and that. Well, sort of keeping up with that is very difficult. So that's always a constant challenge. Maybe the single most concerning one is the ability to find qualified coaches. And in today's world, with regards to the challenges for teachers, a lot of our younger teachers are choosing not to coach because of the requirements of the job. And I'm not saying that the teaching part isn't important. I'm an educator first. But the reality is, when I post a job, in the last 5 jobs that I've posted, I have not received more than 2 what I would consider qualified candidates. That's not much to choose from. And those candidates haven't always come from the teaching world. They've come from the outside world, which, if you've never been involved with teaching and students, and it takes a lot of work to bring them up to speed. And it's a challenge. And I think all districts are facing that. You know, the fact that, you know, there are not a lot of qualified people looking to coach anymore. And that is a concern. You know, funding of coaches' education and professional development, I think, is huge. It's something that we don't have a lot of. You know, if you think about it, what we give teachers for professional development, in many ways, our coaches need it equally. Because the fact that, you know, they are spending so much time with these kids in things that they love, and being able to support those kids, I think, is incredibly important. And then the age-old fight between the club and travel sports versus high school, and that's a growing concern everywhere, not just at Mendon and Upton, but, you know, fighting with these club programs that are offering things to students that are frankly telling students they cannot participate in high school sports, otherwise they will not be able to play on that club. And much of the recruitment now for college does come out of the club world. So, you know, we're fighting an uphill battle consistently in our world. So, you know, thank you very much. I hope you learned a little bit tonight about things maybe you didn't know that were going on. But certainly, you know, just as I've said to Dr. Maruschek and Mr. Clements, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity that I've had over the last couple of years. It's professionally, it's been tremendous, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you.
So does anybody have any questions or follow-up, you know, things that they'd like to bring up?
Sorry, I forgot.
I just would like to say, I think that's a great program you started, that Warrior Training, the Warrior of the Month. It's nice for not always the top performing athlete to get awards, for it to be spread out, and
Thank you.
I think that's a great program.
And the other nice thing too, it's allowed us to highlight some of the programs that don't receive the
Yeah.
recognition, you know, the
Yeah.
footballs and the basketballs, but some of the programs that, you know, we have had success in, and we have kids doing great things in, but people don't get to see it.
It's really nice.
Do you want to finish?
I
the
did,
last
yes, and I
slide?
apologize. I do have.
Whoops.
I did have what's next. We are beginning to work on a Hall of Fame here. We're in the infancy stages. We're actually having our first meeting next month. This is probably an 18-month process, but it's something that we hope to roll out officially in the fall of 19 and be able to install our first group of Hall of Famers. We will have community members, former athletic directors, myself, Mr. Clements, and a couple of former Nipmuc grads that are assisting in the creation of this program. Obviously, we're continuing to focus on leadership opportunities for our athletes. Another big one is the greater vertical integration between our school and our sending school, that being MISCO. Certainly bringing those kids here and having them enjoy Nipmuc athletics, and then, certainly to increase coaches' supervision and education opportunities. So now I got it all in.
Chris, I have to tell you, I was really surprised when I saw the slide about how many students are participating in athletics. And I have heard fabulous buzz about school pride, and I've seen it in action. And so I have a very strong social emotional push and passion about making sure all of our kids are good. And I feel like athletics, when you're affecting this many kids in your district, how many students do we have at Nipmuc?
No, it's 633.
633, and we're almost pushing 600. That's almost all of our students. So we have such a nice opportunity with our coaches to kind of further our mission about making sure that every student is well taken care of. So I was just kind of curious about what kind of feedback methods you get from the beginning of the season all the way through the season, kind of 360. Because your athletics program hits a lot of people. It hits students, it hits coaches, it hits parents. Like, what kinds of feedback systems do you have in place to make sure that everyone's doing well, particularly from a student
Sure.
perspective?
I would say probably the most frequent feedback I receive, and one with perhaps the greatest, I guess, I don't know if we want to call it success, but impact, are the consistent meetings that I have with all of our captains. And I think especially over the last, I would say 2 years, and certainly this year, because now the kids know me well enough, it's an environment where they can share feedback with me that it's sort of the Vegas rules, if you will. In other words, they understand that feedback that's being shared with me is feedback that I will certainly take, that they don't have to worry about any type of repercussion, but that I'll also then utilize to improve things in whichever way that might be the case. And I will be honest that the kids have been very honest with me with regards to that. And I've asked those captains and empowered them to solicit their own feedback from their players, and if there are issues that they should come and speak with me. And I think our captains do a very good job of that, I would say. I think the other thing too is, I think, I like to think I'm pretty visible with our student athletes. I'm pretty much at just about everything, or events that are certainly athletic related. So I think with even some of the younger athletes, I have gained a rapport with them, and will engage in dialogue that they have then provided feedback to me. I do meet as part of the advisory group. I meet with all of the freshmen and sophomores over the course of the year. I do give a lesson, but ultimately too, so there's a name and a face, and I think that's helped that as well. I've yet to develop something that has formalized anything, and it's not that I'm against it. I think it's something that may be the next step that we go, and it's something that, because I think it's very personal in nature, we want to make sure that we create the right implement that will sort of get us the information that we're looking for, that we can use it in a constructive and a positive way, not in a punitive way, if you will.
I'm sometimes a little bit concerned because I remember being a student athlete a million years ago, and I think sometimes voices are hard to hear. And there's a lot of kids on a team that a coach is responsible for. So that student voice for me is super important, that everyone gets a voice. So it might be that kid that's really quiet, that doesn't feel comfortable speaking up to their captain, because Lord knows there's a lot of those dynamics in high school that are very cliquey and things of that nature. So I do think it's really important that all students have a voice, that 360, every kid gets to weigh in with it being completely anonymous, and
So
that they don't
with
have to
360,
worry.
you mean like Like almost like a 360 review of the captains themselves, or the coaches, or?
Coaches, experience, just the experience in general, being able to evaluate what has it been like, whether you're, because certainly it's going to be an incredibly different experience if you are starting every game versus if you're warming the bench every game.
Yes,
It's a
it could
different
be.
experience for these kids.
It could be, but I would say in that same vein, it could also be a fulfilling experience.
I'm not saying it's
yeah.
negative or positive,
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's different.
Mhm.
That star athlete has a very different experience, and that's not necessarily a positive one.
No.
That
That's
star
very true.
athlete has a lot of pressure on them, coming from the coach, coming from their peers, coming from their parents, coming from the community. So I'm not saying it's positive or negative one way or the other. It can be very different, and I think that it's important to always have a good gauge of what their experience has been, because again, this kind of all comes back to the social emotional piece for me, that at the end of the day, athletics should be positive. You should be coached positively, you should be supported positively by your teammates, by your parents, by the community, by your school. So it's really important that I think we have a gauge of that. And not just at the beginning of the season and not just at the end of the season, but throughout the season. And I don't know if you have, it sounds like you're starting to develop plans along those lines to try to elicit some of that feedback from students, but I think it's really important.
And I just have to thank you for your, the commitment that you've, brought to the athletic program here at Minden Upton and Nipmuc specifically. Looking at the, kind of at the ebb and flow of participation. I think one of the great things that we did as a district was to lower the athletic fees from one point, because I was a parent who was paying astronomical.
$600.
Well, I was paying a lot more than that because I had 3 kids in high school sports. So I think that has been a huge, made a huge impact on our sports in the district as well.
And I would agree. I think to be fair, I was the sort of the lucky recipient of that. And believe me, I totally get it.
But success
But it's-
breeds success.
Exactly. And I think just because the fees were lower doesn't mean that a lot more students necessarily would, unless we had programs to support the interest, and the interest is success. They want to be part of those successful teams, and that's part of your work, and your approachability too. It doesn't go unnoticed. So thank you.
I think your leadership has been phenomenal, Chris, and I also, I think the success piece, but also to underscore what Diane was saying, the selection of coaches and the culture that they create can never, ever be underestimated. Just look at the success of some of our programs and the culture that the coaches create with the kids, with their families, and so on. That can never be underscored.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think you've done a fabulous job, Chris. I mean, just looking at that number tells you that you've done a fabulous job, that we have that many kids participating in athletics. But it's kind of cyclical, because then it becomes even more important. Because if you've got this number, we want to make sure we're supporting them. And I just think we have seen a complete turnaround in the Nipmuc program, largely in part because of you. And I personally thank you for the work that you're doing, because I think it's great.
And congratulations on the athletes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chris. This is another fun one.
So, we're
Okay.
going to
Yeah,
need a motion.
so just as a background, and I put this in your packet, for consideration and a motion tonight, what the district is recommending is that we establish a stabilization fund for the purposes of capital projects. So, Jay, can you kind of speak to where we are with regard to those 2 years of MSBA reimbursement for prior projects?
Yes. So timing is everything, I guess, and for reasons I don't know, the reimbursement from the state, from MSBA on the Nipmuc and NISCO projects that were from 97 and I think NISCO opened in 98 or 99, they were split into 2 separate payments and there's a 2-year lag between the two. But the bond was one bond. It was borrowed, we refunded it in 2005, I believe, but it was paid in full as of the end of the last fiscal year. But we still have 2 more years of reimbursement on that project from MSBA. It's about $337,000 each year that we're still getting. So the way the rules work is because the bond is done, that money just goes into the general fund. And in my opinion, it would be a mistake to just spend it on operational costs. It really should be reserved for one-time expenses, and because it was a capital reimbursement in the first place, the obvious solution to me is to put it into some kind of stabilization account and save it for the next capital project, mainly the one we just talked about, the Nipmuc roof that we just submitted for. I think it was maybe 2 years ago we brought you a capital project list throughout the district. Chris just referenced one about the athletic facilities, but it was about $6 million worth of work. So this is, 10% of that cost, but the roof was part of that. So in order to establish the stabilization fund account, we have to get permission from the 2 towns. We can't just do it on our own. So there's a motion for the school committee to make to send these warrant articles to the 2 towns. They'll put it on their annual town meeting. It has to be approved by a majority of our members of the regional district, but as you know, when you only have 2, the majority is of both of them. They hopefully will vote on it in May, and if they approve it, we can then establish this account that'll go into effect, and then we can appropriate these funds into that account and save it. Now, in my head, the goal, if I have the estimated cost of the roof project, you could actually cover that cost without having to go to the towns and ask for money. But even if it doesn't go there, it still offsets some future capital project, and we have an enormous number of them that need to be addressed. So to me, the money should be put aside and saved, and that's the purpose of this, is to put it aside and save it.
Jay, can I ask a question? Do you know if this vote needs to be a 2/3 majority at the town meeting vote?
I do not know that. I'll find that out before the town meetings. If you have to establish, it's us establishing the stabilization, so it just says it's a majority of the towns. There is actually the advisory might say what the towns have to vote on, but I'll find that out.
Stabilization normally needs a 2/3 vote when it votes at town meeting.
But when we want to borrow money and you approve our bond, it's only a majority vote at the town meeting, or if the town doesn't borrow it, it's a 2/3. So it may only be a majority, but we'll definitely know that because obviously I'm going to need to know that in Mendon. And you're going to need to know that in
Yeah, but we're the night before, so.
Yeah. Well, you can be the trial run.
Yeah.
We'll find that out before the town meeting, and I'll make sure that everybody's aware. So I'm asking you to vote on this tonight, and then depending on your vote, I would forward the warrant article, the whole thing, to the towns. Because I think the deadline, what is the deadline for your warrant, do you know?
March
To
16th.
answer your question, it's a simple majority, both here at the school committee and at the town meeting, but to actually allocate funds from it, then you need the 2/3.
But the 2/3 is from the school committee, not the towns.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it needs to be part of our budget, so we either have to recertify this year's budget to use this year's funds, or let this year's funds roll into E&D and appropriate both next year's and E&D into next year's account, which would probably be the way to go. But it gets the money set aside, and that's really the priority to me, is you gotta have this money saved for capital projects. That's it.
Questions, comments?
No.
I think it's a smart move
Yeah.
to put the
Yeah.
money aside for
Which should be done.
the capital improvements. So
And
maybe-
let me understand too, this general fund for what? General fund for the school district it would go to?
Yes.
So we're just saying stabilize it and then.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Just, if it stays in the general fund, it gets closed to E&D, and it's like, it would be in E&D, so you could always, but E&D is a kind of a fictitious number anyway by the state's definition. as opposed to a real hard number. This puts it into a hard number into an account and puts it aside.
Okay.
Any other motion? Are there no further questions?
Wants to read out the motion?
I'll do it.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to establish a stabilization fund and submit the following warrant article language to the towns requesting their permission to establish a stabilization fund for the Mendon Upton Regional School District. And the town warrant would read, to see if the town of Mendon and Upton will approve the establishment of a stabilization fund by the Mendon Upton Regional School District beginning July 1st, 2018 under MGL Chapter 71, Section 16G, 1/2, or to take any other action relative thereto.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And the important thing to add is the warrant at the town meeting is not going to involve any dollar. There's no cost to the towns for any of this. It just allows us to create the account.
Correspondence. Joe, you sent out some
Sure, yeah.
correspondence that I think is timely and important.
Yeah, I would feel remiss if I didn't mention this in one of our public meetings. You have in your packet a letter that was drafted by myself and our 2 chiefs of police, which was sent to all of our parents and all of our staff members this past week in response to the tragedy in Parkland, Florida. I think it kind of spells out where we are as a district. And I had the opportunity the week before last, I think as you all know, I was in Nashville, Tennessee for the National Superintendents Association Conference. And I went to a session that was conducted by a gentleman by the name of Joe Arardi. And Joe just retired as the superintendent of Newtown, Connecticut. And Joe's session was on school safety, and ironically it was held on the 15th, the day after what happened in Florida. And Joe told, some real gut-wrenching stories about his experiences in Newtown. But he opened the session with saying, realize you're never ever going to have a complete school safety plan. And the day that you think it's complete and it covers everything, you should probably just retire. But then the second point that he made is realize, of course you should create plans that are reasonable, that are sustainable, that are proactive. But nothing ever trumps having a healthy school culture, having a school climate where social emotional learning and emotional well-being of everybody under the building is your number one priority, and that you're crafting a culture where the adults in the building know the kids very well, and kids feel very safe and secure, particularly in the event that there's a threat or there's even red flags, that they have somebody to speak to. So I sent that out, obviously after reflecting upon that and thinking about the cultures that we're striving to create and the successes that we've had within our district. Realize we have had, as I'm sure you know as school committee members, when anything is brought to the fore, we do investigate it thoroughly. We do have very, very close partnerships with our school resource officers, but also with everybody in public safety. And we'll continue to build those partnerships. We'll continue to strengthen what we do with regard to training for our staff and looking at every possibility. But I do feel very secure about our schools with regard to our cultures and continuing to grow that as well. So I just bring that for your consideration, and I felt like it was important to mention.
I agree. Other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting? All right. future agenda items, the FY 2019 open budget hearing meeting on March 12th, and then the homework committee update on March 26th. Anything further? Good? May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.